All right, so are you ready for a pretty dark one today?
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be taking a look at Jeffrey Dahmer
Okay.
and really kind of trying to figure out, was he a cunning manipulator or just deeply disturbed? We've got a ton of sources here.
Yeah.
We've got his Wikipedia page, some in-depth legal case studies.
Mm-hmm.
We've got news articles from places like People and The Sun.
Wow.
We've even got like a whole academic paper
Mm-hmm.
that is dissecting his trial.
That's a lot to dig through. It's a complex case, for sure.
Yeah.
What I think is particularly interesting here is that Dahmer's life story really forces us to grapple with this uncomfortable question. Can someone be both profoundly intelligent and utterly depraved?
Yeah, that's a good point. Because when you look at the surface, Dahmer had a seemingly normal childhood in Wisconsin.
Right.
Growing up alongside his brother David, there weren't really any glaring red flags,
Yeah.
at least not at first.
That's what's so unsettling about these cases. A seemingly normal upbringing is something we find time and time again in the histories of people who commit heinous crimes.
Yeah,
It really challenges our assumptions about the origins of evil, doesn't it?
totally. But then you dig a little deeper and you find some pretty disturbing details,
Oh.
like Dahmer's early fascination with animal bones.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so picture this. Most kids are out playing tag, building forts,
Right.
and this kid is in the woods collecting and dissecting animal remains.
Oh, that's unsettling.
Yeah, it's disturbing.
So this is where we start to see those early signs of what we call zoosadism.
Zoosadism.
Yeah, it's a fascination with death and a lack of empathy for living creatures.
Right,
Oftentimes that can be a precursor to violence against humans.
right.
So that behavior, coupled with his seemingly normal upbringing, provides an interesting and complex psychological puzzle for us to unpack.
Okay, so how did this fascination with death manifest as Dahmer got older?
Yeah.
Let's fast forward to his young adulthood. He struggles with alcohol. He drops out of Ohio State University.
Mhm.
And then in 1978, he commits his first documented murder.
Wow.
Stephen Tuomi, who he met at a bar.
So what's really fascinating here is how the bar scene became this recurring backdrop for Dahmer's crimes.
Really?
Yeah, it was almost like a hunting ground for him.
Really?
He'd blend in, appear non-threatening, and target vulnerable individuals, often on the fringes of society, people he likely believed wouldn't be missed.
Wouldn't that imply a degree of calculation, though?
Totally.
It sounds like he was deliberately choosing spaces where he could exploit people.
Exactly. And this is where things get really complex because it suggests a disturbing level of awareness and premeditation behind his actions.
So it wasn't just like blind rage driving him.
No.
There was a thought process.
A strategy.
Yeah.
And as his crimes escalated, becoming more frequent and more brutal, we see that same calculated approach in his modus operandi. The drugging, the strangulation, the dismemberment,
Yeah.
all point to a desire not just to kill, but to exert complete control over his victims.
And let's not forget the truly horrifying details that came out during the police raid of his apartment.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about a refrigerator full of human organs, attempts to create living zombies through lobotomies.
Yeah, this wasn't just about murder for Dahmer. It was
Yeah.
about domination.
Right.
About possessing his victims even after death.
Yeah.
The level of depravity is really hard to comprehend.
Yeah.
And it really begs the question, given his meticulous planning, could Dahmer have been both mentally ill and manipulative?
That's a question that plagued the experts during his trial.
Really?
The sources we have actually present some conflicting opinions surrounding his mental state.
Okay.
Some argue for insanity, citing severe mental illness, while others believe he was fully aware of his actions. What do you make of that?
It's one of the most perplexing aspects of this case. And honestly, it's a debate that continues to this day.
Right.
You know, it forces us to consider the interplay of mental illness and criminal intent,
Right.
which is a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Can we truly separate the act from the individual?
Yeah.
Where does culpability lie when someone is clearly disturbed?
Yeah.
Yet also exhibits such deliberate and calculated behavior?
Yeah, that's a great question.
It is.
Really is.
Yeah, it really is a tough question
But answer.
to answer.
Yeah, and I think that difficulty speaks to just how complex Dahmer's case truly is.
Exactly.
It's not a simple black and white situation.
Yeah, it's not.
So given that,
Yeah.
how do we even begin to make sense of Dahmer's motivations?
Right.
Were his crimes driven purely by mental illness? Or was there something more sinister at play?
Right. Well, while his personal demons clearly played a part,
Yeah.
we can't ignore the role of the environment that Dahmer operated in. You
Oh.
know, the sources we have point out that he often targeted individuals who were marginalized or on the fringes of society.
Okay, think about it. People of color, sex workers, individuals struggling with addiction.
Yeah.
These are the people he preyed upon.
Right.
People he believed wouldn't be missed.
That raises a crucial point about who Dahmer targeted. And it makes you wonder if societal biases and prejudices might have, in a way, facilitated his crimes.
That's a very important question.
Yeah.
And it's one that we as a society need to grapple with.
Yeah.
You know, did those biases, that tendency to overlook or even demonize certain groups of people,
Right.
create an environment where a predator like Dahmer could operate with a sense of impunity?
Yeah.
It's a very uncomfortable truth to consider.
Yeah. It really is.
It is.
And it really speaks to the broader societal context in which these horrific events unfolded.
Exactly.
But let's shift gears a bit
Okay.
and talk about the role of addiction in Dahmer's life. The sources mention his struggles with alcohol.
Right.
Could this have fueled his violent tendencies?
Absolutely.
Okay. You know, we know that alcohol lowers inhibitions and impairs judgment, making it easier for someone with pre-existing violent impulses to act on them.
Right.
And in Dahmer's case, remember that many of his victims were met in bars, environments where alcohol consumption is prevalent.
So it's not just that alcohol might have fueled his rage,
Right.
but it also provided him with easy access to potential victims.
Precisely.
Right.
It's a tragic confluence of factors. You have a deeply disturbed individual struggling with addiction,
Right.
operating within a societal context where certain groups of people are marginalized and overlooked.
Right.
It created this perfect storm.
Yeah.
A situation where Dahmer was able to exploit vulnerabilities and commit these horrific acts.
Okay, so we've talked about mental illness, societal neglect, and addiction.
Yeah.
All of these factors undoubtedly played a role in Dahmer's crimes.
Right.
But how do we reconcile that with the clear evidence of premeditation and calculation in his actions?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
Because if you look at his methods, the drugging, the attempts at lobotomy, the meticulous efforts to dispose of bodies,
Right.
it paints a picture of someone who was both disturbed and incredibly cunning.
Right. And the sources also mention that Dahmer had a certain charm,
Yes.
like a charisma, that he used to lure his victims.
And that's what makes his case so perplexing and, frankly, so terrifying.
Yeah.
He was able to use those intelligence, charm, even a degree of charisma as tools for manipulation and control.
It's a chilling reminder that appearances can be deceiving.
Absolutely.
We can't always rely on first impressions or superficial charm.
Right.
Dahmer's case really forces us to confront the fact that darkness can lurk beneath the most seemingly ordinary exterior.
It definitely does.
So going back to our original question,
Right.
was Dahmer a visionary or a con artist?
Right.
I think it's safe to say that the visionary argument doesn't hold water here.
I agree.
His intelligence and charisma, however twisted, were ultimately tools for deception.
Exactly.
A means to an incredibly dark end.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Mm-hmm.
But while we can definitively reject the visionary label in Dahmer's case,
Yeah.
the conversation about his legacy doesn't end there.
You're talking about the victims and their families.
Exactly.
Right.
Their stories are often overshadowed by Dahmer's infamy,
Yes, they are.
but they are the ones who bear the true weight of his crimes.
Absolutely. And that's what we need to focus on in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay.
How has Dahmer's notoriety affected their lives?
Right.
And what does justice truly look like for them?
It's easy to get caught up in the morbid fascination of a case like this.
Yeah.
But we can't forget that behind the headlines,
Yeah.
the documentaries,
Mhm.
the true crime podcasts,
Yeah.
there are real people whose lives were shattered
That's
by
about
his
right.
actions.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
The victims and their families are the ones who carry the true weight of Dahmer's legacy. They're the ones left to grapple with the unimaginable pain and trauma of his crimes.
And the sources we have really highlight the ongoing struggle these families face.
Yeah.
They talk about the re-traumatizing effect of all the media attention,
Right.
the books,
Mm-hmm.
the Moojis,
Yeah.
especially the recent Netflix series.
Right.
It's like they can't escape the shadow of Dahmer,
Yeah.
even all these years later.
It's heartbreaking to think about.
Yeah.
Imagine having to relive the loss of your loved one every time a new portrayal of their killer hits the airwaves.
Right.
Or worse, is turned into entertainment for the masses.
Yeah.
It's a constant reminder of the horror they experienced,
Yeah.
a wound that never truly heals.
It really makes you question the ethics of all this true crime hype, doesn't it?
It does.
Where do we draw the line between public fascination and respect for the victims?
That's a question that continues to spark debate.
Yeah.
Dahmer's story, as horrific as it is,
Right.
undeniably captivates people. But it's important to remember that these are real lives.
Yeah.
Real families forever scarred by his actions.
Right.
Their stories deserve to be told, but not exploited for entertainment value.
So what does justice look like for these families?
Okay.
Is it even possible to find any sense of closure or peace after such a horrific ordeal?
That's a question only the families themselves can answer.
Yeah.
Some might find a measure of solace in knowing that Dahmer was convicted and imprisoned,
Right.
while others may feel that no amount of punishment can ever truly atone for the loss they've suffered.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's a deeply personal journey,
Right.
and one we can only observe with empathy and respect.
This deep dive has been heavy.
It has.
But I think it's so important to have these conversations.
Absolutely.
Dahmer's case isn't just a historical curiosity.
No.
It forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the society we live in.
I agree.
It exposes flaws in the system, missed opportunities for intervention,
Yeah.
biases that led to certain victims being overlooked,
Right.
and a lack of adequate mental health resources.
Yeah, these are systemic issues that we as a society have a responsibility to address.
We can't just focus on the individual perpetrator.
Right.
We have to look at the broader context,
Yeah.
the societal factors that contributed to the tragedy. And we have to ask ourselves,
Yeah,
what can we do to prevent something like this from happening again?
exactly. We need to be more aware,
Yeah.
more compassionate,
Mm-hmm.
and more committed to creating a society that values and protects every single life.
Yeah.
Dahmer's story, as disturbing as it is,
Yeah.
should serve as a wake-up call,
Yeah.
prompting us to invest in mental health services, challenge prejudices, and create a more just and equitable world.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the complex and disturbing world of Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground, exploring the depths of his depravity, the complexities of his psychology, and the lasting impact of his crimes. But most importantly, I hope we've shed light on the stories of the victims and their families, the
Absolutely.
ones who truly deserve our attention and empathy.
We can never forget the human cost of Dahmer's actions.
Right.
And while we may never fully understand the darkness that drove him,
Right.
we can learn from his story and work towards a future where such tragedies are less likely to occur.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on this difficult but necessary journey.